Radio? I wonder how many Acme viewers remember this. Gathering around in the evening, looking at each other, knitting, enjoying a good program like Acme. You see, once upon a time, TV didn't have pictures. Radio goes back to, well, way back to the 19th century. If we start naming dates and times, letters will start pouring in. If you want to know who gets the credit for what, look up James Clerk Maxwell, Heinrich Hertz, Guglielmo Marconi, Edwin Armstrong, and Reginald Aubrey Fessenden. Actually, what's to invent? This is radio at its purest. This is an AM radio not tuned to a station, and this is a flashlight cell and a piece of wire. Here's a bit of strict science. Radio uses electromagnetic waves, the same electromagnetic waves that your eyes interpret as light and the same electromagnetic waves that cook your food in a microwave oven. The difference is a matter of wavelength. Lost yet? Let's dump the strict science and stick to a looser explanation. Physicists might like to leave the room for a minute. Using just a flashlight cell and your trusty Boy Scout compass, you can prove to yourself that magnetism results from an electric current flowing in a wire. Now take the following leap of faith. When the current starts to flow, the magnetic field doesn't appear instantaneously. It grows outward to its final position. Similarly, when the current stops, the field takes time to collapse. The time to form and collapse is very small, but it's there. Now imagine what happens if the current's made to go on and off rapidly. If the new field is made to build before the old one can collapse, we can start to pump magnetism out into space. That isn't exactly what happens, but it's a darn good way to feel comfortable about it. The electrical fluctuations at the center of the AM radio band are about 1 million per second, or 1,000 kilocycles, or kilohertz, or whatever they're calling it these days. Voice and music are routinely changed into electrical fluctuations by microphones, but these fluctuations are too slow to be directly useful to radio. Modern radio broadcasting uses modulated carrier waves. The transmitter creates a powerful wave at some wavelength that's been assigned to the station. For AM radio, the relatively slower voice and music fluctuations are made to vary the strength, or fancy word, amplitude, of the high-frequency carrier. This is amplitude modulation, AM. Radio can be received with another piece of wire held up in the air. Trust me, this hunk of wire is currently receiving all of the radio stations in Toronto. Electromagnetic waves passing by at the speed of light are inducing little currents in it. The simplest receiver can be made with a sensitive earpiece, a long wire, and a diode. The wire goes out the window, the earpiece goes in your ear, and the diode, the diode. The received radio wave is symmetrical. The top and bottom of this picture are equal but opposite. They cancel. To recover the amplitude modulation, it's necessary to throw out half of it. That's what the diode's for. It lets current flow only in one direction. It can be used to change this into this. This you can hear in the earpiece. You have a further problem. You're now listening to every radio station in your area all at once. To tune the radio requires these, a coil of wire and a capacitor. The capacitor and coil can work together to make an electrically resonant circuit. And the resonant circuit can act like a good pathway for the frequency it's tuned to and a rotten path for all others. Either the coil or the capacitor can be adjusted to change the resonant frequency. Modern radios adjust the capacitor. In a real modern radio, the capacitor looks like this. The little cans inside house the coils. To select just one of the carrier frequencies, several resonant circuits in a row are needed. In the early 1900s, radios had dials, several of them, that all had to be tuned at the same spot. In 1916, the superheterodyne radio was invented, and all radios since have been superheterodyne. The superheterodyne receiver fixes its reception at one frequency. It's 455,000 cycles per second for AM radios. At the antenna end, a circuit converts the station of interest to that intermediate frequency. This saves having to adjust several resonant circuits in concert. They're fixed at the factory. You might have tuned a guitar by listening to the beat note you get from two similar notes. When you tune a superheterodyne, you're actually tuning a small radio transmitter that beats with the incoming carriers to make incoming carriers plus harmonics of incoming carriers. The harmonic that happens to end up at the internally resonant setting is the station you hear. The resonant row of circuits is called the IF strip. IF for intermediate frequency. Now, if you believe absolutely none of this, use one superhet to confuse another superhet. Place two radios together, turn one up, not tuned to a station. Keep the volume off on the other, and tune this silent one. Now, I have no way of proving to you that the sound's coming from the one I'm not touching, so you'll have to try this yourself. FM radio uses all of the same stuff, with one big improvement. Static can be heard on AM radio because of all sorts of random electromagnetic disturbances. They'll add to the carrier and become part of the modulation. In FM, instead of the modulation varying the carrier wave strength, the modulation varies the carrier wave's frequency. So FM 104 is only nominally at 104 million cycles per second. The music and voice on FM 104 is wobbling the carrier frequency to either side. To detect this kind of modulation doesn't require a diode. It practically detects itself. As the carrier passes through resonant circuits, it rises and falls in strength proportionate to the frequency wobble. To eliminate static, the received carrier wave is sliced electronically, and the top and bottom, containing any superfluous junk, are discarded. The original frequency modulation is still there. TV is broadcast using an AM carrier for the picture and an FM carrier for the sound. These two carriers are always a fixed distance apart in frequency, and as a convenience, you tune both at once. Originally, it was intended to have two IF strips in a TV receiver, one for picture, one for sound. It was a black day when some genius figured out that the sound and picture could share one IF strip to save money. The problem is that the two carriers do a bit of their own heterodyning in the intermediate frequency strip. You might not have known the reason, but you've experienced the result. Bright scenes and white titles buzz on some sets. Don't blame science.